My family cut me off for 7 years without a single phone call. They threw me out with 2 garbage bags and a frozen bank account. But everything changed the night they walked uninvited into my company's black tie client gala, right in the middle of the biggest evening of my professional life. My brother cornered me near the champagne bar, slid a legal document across the high-top table, and told me to sign over 35% of my agency immediately, or he would personally destroy my relationship with my most important client before midnight. What he did not know was that the moment he made that threat, he had already lost. My name is Mia, and I am 32 years old. I am the founder and sole owner of Calloway Creative, a boutique branding and public relations agency based in Austin, Texas. We represent some of the fastest-growing real estate developers, hospitality groups, and tech startups in the state. Before I go any further, I want to know where you are watching from. So, leave your city in the comments below. And if you have ever had to rebuild your entire life after someone you trusted burned it down, hit subscribe right now. Because I promise you this story is going to feel very familiar. It was the third Friday of October, and downtown Austin was electric, with the kind of cool autumn energy that makes you feel like anything is possible. Inside the main floor of the Callaway Creative headquarters, every light in the building was precisely calibrated to cast a warm amber glow across the exposed brick walls. Servers in black moved through the crowd carrying trays of aged cheddar crostini and smoked salmon bites. A string quartet played in the corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline. We were hosting our annual client showcase, the evening where I presented the agency's campaign results to our top clients, unveiled new partnerships, and reminded everyone in that room why they trusted us with their brand. I had spent 11 months planning this event. Every single detail, from the custom laser-cut invitations to the locally sourced catering menu, it was a direct reflection of who I had become. I was standing near the main presentation wall, reviewing talking points with my creative director, Priya, when I noticed a shift in the energy near the entrance. It was subtle at first, the kind of atmospheric disturbance you only learn to detect after years of managing events. Then I turned and saw them. My brother Nathan was the first one through the glass doors. He was wearing a navy blazer that fit him 2 sizes too tight across the shoulders. The same blazer I remembered him buying at a discount rack the last Thanksgiving we spent together. Behind him came his wife Brooke, dripping in a brand new designer dress that had clearly been purchased within the last 48 hours, because she kept tugging at the unfamiliar hem. And directly behind them, moving with the slow, deliberate authority of a man who believed every room belonged to him by birthright, came my father. I had not seen any of them in 7 years. My feet stopped moving. The last time I saw my father, I was 25 years old. I was sitting on the curb outside the house I had been renting a room in since I started building my freelance client list. It was a bitter January morning, and I had both garbage bags between my feet because my father had arrived with a spare key while I was at a client meeting and physically packed my belongings himself. My crime, according to him, was refusing to co-sign a $60,000 personal loan so Nathan could expand a restaurant concept that had already failed twice. I told him I needed my savings to fund my own business. He told me I was the most selfish, ungrateful person he had ever raised, and that I did not deserve to carry our family name. He told me to figure it out on my own, since I was so determined to put myself above everyone else. For 7 years, they kept that promise with surgical precision. No birthday calls, no holiday texts. My mother did not reach out when my grandmother passed. My brother did not tell me when Brooke was pregnant. They simply erased me from the family album and carried on. And now here they were, standing in the lobby of the company I had built entirely without them. Scanning the room with the calculating eyes of people who had come to collect, I handed my notes to Priya without a word and crossed the floor toward the entrance. My heels were silent against the polished concrete. I kept my expression completely neutral and professional. The same face I wore in boardrooms when a client tried to lowball a proposal. I reached them just as my front desk coordinator, James. It was politely explaining that the event was private and that a guest list confirmation was required. Nathan looked past James entirely and spoke directly to me. Mia, you are going to want to hear what I have to say before this night gets complicated. He said it quietly, but with a practiced deliberateness that told me he had rehearsed the line in the car on the way over. I looked at my father, who did not offer a greeting. He simply looked around the space with that signature expression I had grown up dreading, the slow, appraising scan of a man calculating what something was worth and whether he deserved it. James, I said, keeping my voice low and even. Please seat our unexpected guests at the private table in the west alcove and let Chef Renata know we have 3 additions. I turned to Nathan and gave him the kind of smile I reserved for unreasonable vendors. We can talk privately. Follow me. I watched them trail behind me through the main floor. Brooke made a show of glancing at the campaign installation pieces mounted along the gallery wall, then turned to Nathan and whispered something with a dismissive little shake of her head. My father walked with his hands clasped behind his back, not looking at the work at all, only at the guests. Counting the quality of the suits in the room, the way a man totals receipts. The west alcove was a semi-private space I used for sensitive client conversations. It had a curved velvet banquette, a marble high table, and a subtle privacy screen of smoked glass that allowed me to see the main floor without being clearly visible from it. I gestured for them to sit. None of them thanked me. Brooke immediately picked up the printed menu card from the table and turned it over without reading it. I need something without gluten, she announced to no one in particular. My father sat down and rested both forearms on the table, leaning forward in the posture of a man who intends to dominate whatever conversation follows. You look well, he said. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. Clinical and stripped of warmth, like noting that weather conditions were adequate. 7 years, I said, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down. That is a long time to go without calling. What changed tonight? Nathan reached inside his blazer and pulled out a folded document. He set it on the table between us and smoothed it flat with his palm. What changed is that we are here to give you an opportunity, he said. A real one. I looked down at the document without touching it. It was a partnership agreement, professionally formatted, with my agency's legal name printed at the top. The terms were brief and brutal. 35% equity transfer to Nathan as a silent business partner in exchange for what the document vaguely described as continued family harmony and the absence of reputational interference. Reputational interference. My father tapped the document with 2 fingers. You have built something impressive here, Mia. Nobody is taking that away from you. What we are saying is that it is time you recognize that you did not build it in a vacuum. This family sacrificed a great deal raising you. Your brother supported your early career in ways you seem to have conveniently forgotten. It is time to formalize the contribution. I looked at Nathan, who was maintaining practiced eye contact, the expression of someone performing confidence rather than feeling it. What contribution are you referring to? Specifically, I asked. The referral, Nathan said. He leaned back and crossed his arms. When you were first starting out, I referred Derek Harmon to you. He became your first anchor client. That agency would not exist without that introduction. Derek Harmon was the founder of a mid-size hospitality group. He had been my client for 6 years. He was also, as of this fiscal year, responsible for approximately 40% of my annual revenue. Nathan had introduced us at a family barbecue 7 years ago. About 3 weeks before everything fell apart. It was a casual conversation over potato salad. Derek was there as Nathan's neighbors plus one. "You want 35% of a 7-figure agency," I said slowly. "Because 7 years ago you introduced me to someone at a neighborhood cookout. I want what is fair." Nathan said, "Derek Harmon made you. And I am the reason you know Derek Harmon. More importantly, Derek Harmon and I have stayed close over the years. We play golf together. We go to the same church. And I have a meeting with him next Thursday morning." He paused, letting the implication settle. "It would be a real shame if certain information about your business practices came up in that conversation." There it was. The threat was not wrapped in generosity or family language anymore. It was bare and deliberate. He was telling me he would poison my most valuable client relationship unless I surrendered a third of everything I owned. Brooke nodded along as Nathan spoke. Swirling a glass of sparkling water, she had helped herself to from a passing server's tray without asking. My father folded his hands and looked at me with that expression I had spent years trying to forget. The one that said he was doing me a favor by even speaking to me. "You have a choice tonight." "Mia," he said. "You can do this the way families do things. With some give and take. Or you can let your pride cost you everything you have spent the last 7 years building. Your clients trust you because of your reputation. Reputations are fragile. You know that better than anyone in this business." I sat very still for a moment. Across the smoked glass partition, I could see the main floor of my gala, my clients laughing and connecting. My team moving through the crowd with practiced ease. The campaign videos playing on the large screens I had commissioned from a local production company. 7 years of pre-dawn mornings and 7-day workweeks were moving around in that room right now in real time. I looked at the document on the table between us, and I felt something very specific settle into place inside me. Not panic. Not grief. Clarity. I reached forward and pushed the document back across the table toward Nathan. "I want you to be comfortable tonight," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "You came a long way. Let me have the kitchen send out our full tasting menu and we can talk properly." I stood and nodded to James, who was hovering discreetly near the alcove entrance. "Please make sure the table is taken care of." Nathan looked mildly surprised that I had not reacted with more visible distress. He glanced at my father, who gave a small nod of satisfaction, reading my offer of hospitality as surrender. I walked back onto the main floor and let myself breathe. The first call I made was to my attorney, who was actually present at the event as a client. I found her near the bar and spoke to her for 4 minutes. The second thing I did was find Derek Harmon himself, who was standing near the presentation wall with his chief marketing officer. Derek was a straightforward man in his early 50s who had been doing business with me long enough to trust my judgment without question. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it from me directly," I said, keeping my voice low and matter of fact. I told him that members of my family had arrived uninvited and that they had made a threat involving his name specifically. I told him what Nathan had claimed about their ongoing relationship. Derek frowned. He glanced toward the alcove, then back at me. "Nathan Calloway, Mia. I have not spoken to your brother in probably 5 or 6 years. He called me twice in the last 2 months, asking me to put him in touch with my commercial real estate contacts. I did not return those calls." He paused. "He told you we play golf together, he did," I said. Derek shook his head slowly. "What do you need from me tonight?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Just stay accessible." I went back to the alcove. The tasting menu had arrived, and Nathan and Brooke were already working through the charcuterie board with the focused efficiency of people who had skipped dinner. My father was holding a glass of the reserve Cabernet that my sommelier had selected for the evening. It retailed at $280 a bottle. "Let's talk about the actual situation," I said, sitting back down. "Nathan, you told me you have a close relationship with Derek Harmon, that you see him regularly, that you play golf together." Nathan nodded, picking a piece of aged manchego off the board. "Every other weekend at Barton Creek. I just spoke with Derek Harmon," I said. "He is standing 20 feet away on the other side of that glass. He told me he has not spoken to you in approximately 5 years and that he has not returned your recent calls." The cheese stopped moving toward Nathan's mouth. Brooke put down her fork. My father went very still. "So your threat," I continued, my voice carrying the same even tone I would use explaining a campaign analytics report, "is built entirely on a relationship that does not exist. You are going to walk into a meeting with a man who does not take your calls and tell him damaging things about me. That is not leverage. That is a plan that would have ended with Derek Harmon calling me immediately to warn me. Which is exactly what he offered to do tonight." Nathan's jaw tightened. He glanced at my father. And for the first time, the practiced confidence in his posture developed a visible fracture. My father leaned forward. He was not a man who adjusted gracefully to reversals. He recalibrated by escalating. "You are being deliberately difficult," he said, his voice dropping to a register designed to feel authoritative. "The Derek Harmon connection is one option. There are others. Your agency is not the only asset under discussion tonight." He said it with the confident weight of a man holding something back. A final card he had not yet played. "Then play the other cards," I said. He straightened his jacket. "Your agency operates out of this building. This building is owned by a commercial real estate investment group called Summit Property Partners. I have had business dealings with the managing partners of Summit going back 12 years. A single phone call from me, and the terms of your commercial lease become considerably less favorable overnight. Your rent doubles. Your parking allocation gets reassigned. Summit has done it to other tenants before. I have watched it happen." He met my eyes with the slow certainty of a man who believes he is the cleverest person in the room. "You want to keep your beautiful office. Mia. You sign the agreement." Brooke looked at Nathan with a small, victorious smile. Nathan exhaled slowly through his nose and recrossed his arms. He thought my father had just ended the negotiation. I looked at my father for a long moment. 7 years of silence between us and his first real conversation with me was a threat. I thought about the morning I sat on that curb with my garbage bags. I thought about the joint savings account my parents had opened for me when I was a teenager. In the account I used to hold my freelance income while I was still living at home. The account my father had his name on as a co-signatory. In the account that had exactly $4,800 in it the week I was thrown out. The account that was empty when I checked it 4 days later from a borrowed laptop at the public library. I had spent 2 years rebuilding that $4,800 from scratch. I had never forgotten the number. "Summit Property Partners," I said quietly. "That is right," my father said. "Tell me what you know about Summit," I said. He gave a short, dismissive shrug. "I know the people who matter. Marcus Webb is the founding partner. I closed an insurance contract with his firm 12 years ago. We have remained in contact." "When did you last speak with Marcus Webb?" I asked. "Recently," he said, which was not an answer. I reached into the small clutch I had set on the banquette beside me and removed a folded document. I placed it on the table, smoothed it flat with one hand. and turned it so it faced him. It was a commercial title transfer document. The originating entity at the top was Summit Property Partners LLC. The receiving entity was printed clearly in bold below it, Calloway Holdings LLC. The transfer date was 14 months ago. My father looked at the document. He did not pick it up. Marcus Webb sold his entire Austin commercial portfolio 18 months ago. I said. He told his investors he was consolidating ahead of retirement. He took a cash offer that closed in under 30 days. I tapped the document once. That offer was mine. Calloway Holdings acquired the building we are sitting in, along with 4 other commercial properties in this district. 14 months ago. I am not leasing this space. I own it. I own the lobby. I own the elevator bank. I own the parking structure you pulled into tonight. Summit Property Partners has no authority over my lease because Summit Property Partners no longer owns anything on this block. The room felt like it lost oxygen for a moment. My father stared at the document. The way his eyes moved, slow and unsteady, told me his brain was processing a rearrangement of reality that his ego was actively resisting. He reached out and picked it up. He read the first paragraph. Then he read it again. Nathan had not moved. Brooke was looking at her husband with an expression I could not fully interpret. Something between confusion and the earliest onset of alarm. That is not possible. My father said. His voice had lost its authority. What was left sounded thin. You are 32 years old. You do not have the capital to acquire commercial real estate. I have been managing my capital since I was 25. I said. I did not take vacations. I did not buy a new car. I had one studio apartment for 4 years. Every dollar I did not spend went into a portfolio that my financial advisor started building the same year you threw me out. The first acquisition was small. The second was larger. By the time Marcus Webb quietly listed this district, I had the liquidity to move fast and close without a lender. My father set the document down carefully, which told me more than anything else he could have said. A man who believes he still has power does not handle documents gently. He only starts treating paper with that kind of delicate attention when he realizes it has more authority than he does. There is something else I want you to know, I said. Calloway Holdings did not only acquire properties in this district. I reached back into my clutch and removed a second document. This one I slid across the table more slowly. It was a commercial lease roster. A list of active tenants in a mixed-use property on the eastern edge of the city, near the bottom of the third column, highlighted in pale yellow, was a business name I had grown up hearing at every dinner table, Calloway Print and Signage. My father's commercial printing shop, Suite 14B. Month-to-month tenancy, since the previous owner declined to renew a long-term agreement 18 months ago. I watched my father's eyes find the name. I watched him read it twice. I watched the moment when he understood. You. He started. And then stopped. I acquired that property 8 months ago. I said. It was a distressed asset. The previous owner was overextended and needed to close quickly. I made a cash offer and received the deed in 3 weeks. I paused. You have been paying rent to Calloway Holdings for the last 8 months. Which means you have been paying rent to me. You just did not know who the new owner was because the property management company handles all tenant communications under the LLC name. Nathan pushed back from the table and stood up. It was not a deliberate move. It was the involuntary response of someone whose body needs to process information physically. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the back of his chair, looking at nothing specific. Brooke turned to him. Nathan. What is happening? What is happening? I said, keeping my gaze on my father. Is that your husband came into my event tonight, to threaten a woman who holds the lease on your family's business. He told me he was going to damage my reputation to protect a bluff. And your father-in-law told me he had the power to make my landlord raise my rent. Not knowing that I am the landlord. My father's face had gone through several colors in the last 2 minutes and had landed somewhere between gray and red. A specific combination I associated with a man who has just lost something he had not realized he was standing on. Mia. His voice was different now. Quieter. The authority had drained out of it, and what was left was something older and smaller. You need to understand that everything your brother and I did over the years, the hard decisions, the tough love, it was for the good of this family. Families do not function without structure. I provided that structure. I made sacrifices you never saw. You drained my savings account. I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud directly to him. My voice did not shake. $4,800. I had been saving for 2 years. You had co-signatory access from when I was a teenager, and you used it 4 days after you threw me out. You knew I had no money. You took what was left. My mother, who had been silent the entire time, pressed her fingers over her lips. She had not spoken a single word since they arrived. She was a woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of being present without being accountable. Close enough to benefit from her husband's decisions and far enough to deny responsibility for them. We needed it, my father said. The justification was immediate and reflexive. The answer of a man who had already made peace with the decision years ago. The business was short on operating capital that quarter. It was a family emergency. I was 25 and sitting on a public library computer with no income and nowhere to sleep. I said, that was also a family emergency. You chose the business over your daughter. That is a choice I respect now. Because it freed me to make my own choices without waiting for your permission. Nathan was still standing. His wife was sitting with her arms crossed, looking at the exit. We should leave, Brooke said flatly. Agreed, I said, but there are 2 things that need to happen first. I gave a small signal toward the alcove entrance. James appeared, accompanied by my event security director, a former corporate risk manager named Gale, who had worked with me for 3 years. Gale was calm and professional and roughly 6 feet tall. She stood at a respectful distance, but her presence was entirely clear. The first thing is the bill, I said. I opened a printed receipt that James had prepared while I was on the main floor and set it in the center of the table. The tasting menu for 3 was $410. The bottle of reserve Cabernet my father had been drinking was $280. The assorted appetizers Brooke had ordered without asking were $160. The event hosting fee for unregistered guests was $300 per person. The total was $1,450. My father looked at the receipt the way he had looked at the title document. Carefully, like a man measuring distance. This is absurd, Nathan said. You invited us to eat. James asked you for your event registration at the door, and you declined to provide it. I said. You were seated as unregistered guests at my discretion. This is a ticketed private event. The pricing is what it is. I looked at Nathan directly. I trust you have a card. Nathan reached into his pocket with the irritated energy of a man being nickeled and dimed, which told me he did not believe the amount was actually a problem. He pulled out a card and handed it to James without looking at it. James stepped away to process it. A silence settled over the alcove. The particular silence of a confrontation that has already been decided, but has not yet been formally closed. James returned 40 seconds later. He handed the card back to Nathan, with the quiet composure of someone delivering difficult news to a difficult person. I apologize, Sir. The card has been declined. Nathan took it back and stared at it. That is not possible. Run it again. It was declined again. He produced a second card. Declined. Brooke looked at her husband with an expression that had passed beyond alarm into something colder. Nathan. What is going on with the accounts? My father, who had been sitting very still, reached into his jacket for his own wallet. He placed a card on the table without a word. James processed it. It cleared for $800 and stopped. The transaction was incomplete. The table went silent. I looked at the three of them. My father, the man who had managed the finances of a commercial business for 30 years, he could not cover a dinner bill at a private event. Nathan, who had come to this room with a legal document demanding 35% of my company, had 2 declined cards in his hand. I did not humiliate them further. I had not come to this moment to perform cruelty. I had come to close something. Gail will walk you out, I said. Standing. I am going to charge the remaining balance to the business, and I will be sending a formal invoice to Calloway Print and Signage by Monday morning. You can settle it along with next month's rent. I picked up the partnership agreement Nathan had brought and folded it in half without looking at it. I will not be signing this. Mia. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was thin and uncertain. The voice of a woman who had spent years watching her husband manage situations and now found herself in one with no manager available. Please. Whatever we did. Whatever mistakes were made. We are still your family. I am still your mother. You cannot just throw us away. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the morning I left. I had looked up at the house from the curb and the light in the front bedroom window was on. She had been awake. She had watched me sit there from behind the curtain, and she had not opened the door. I did not throw you away. I said quietly. I was thrown out. There is a difference, and I have built a life that does not require me to keep reopening the door to people who only knock when they need something. Gail moved forward with quiet professionalism. Nathan and Brooke gathered their things without speaking. My father stood slowly. The way a man moves when his bones feel heavier than they should. He looked around the alcove one more time. At the marble table, and the velvet banquette, and the agency logo etched into the glass partition. And I could see him doing the mental arithmetic of what it had cost to build this, and the years he had spent believing I was incapable of it. He did not say anything when he left. That, more than anything else, told me it was over. I stood at the edge of the main floor and watched Gail walk them through the lobby toward the exit. The gala was still moving. The string quartet. The conversations. The warmth of a room full of people who had trusted me with their brands and their reputations. The disruption had been contained to the alcove. No one in the main room had witnessed anything except the brief appearance of 3 unfamiliar faces near the entrance. I went back to the presentation wall and picked up my notes. Priya appeared beside me within 30 seconds. She was too professional to ask directly. So she simply tilted her head slightly. The way she did when she needed information to do her job. Everything is fine, I told her. Let's start the presentation in 12 minutes. 6 weeks after the gala. I was sitting in my office on a Tuesday morning with a cup of black coffee and an open lease file on my desk. The Eastern property manager had sent over a renewal assessment for Suite 14B. The recommendation was a standard rate adjustment based on current market comparables, a 30% increase phased over 12 months. I read the assessment carefully. Then I set it aside. I opened a different file. One I had been building quietly for about 2 months. It was a partnership agreement with an Austin-based nonprofit called the Founders Forward Initiative. They provided business mentorship, low-cost workspace, and legal support to first-generation entrepreneurs. With a specific focus on women under 30, who had been financially cut off by their families and were building their first ventures without a safety net. I had met the program director at a Chamber of Commerce event in the spring. We had spoken for about 20 minutes. She had told me they were growing fast, but struggling to find affordable commercial space close to the city center. I called my property manager and told her to hold the rate renewal on Suite 14B. Then I called the Founders Forward Initiative program director and asked her if she was still looking for a home. We negotiated a 5-year lease agreement. The monthly rate I offered her was $1. In exchange, she agreed to name one of the main workrooms, the Calloway Resource Suite, and to allow me to serve as an occasional visiting advisor to program participants. The lease papers were signed on a Wednesday afternoon. I signed my name at the bottom of the last page and set the fountain pen down on my desk and looked out the window at the downtown skyline for a long time. Somewhere across that city, my father was running a print shop out of the same building I had purchased without telling him. He was paying rent to an entity he did not recognize, making his monthly checks out to Calloway Holdings without ever connecting the name. By the time my property manager sent the standard tenancy notification about the new sublease in Suite 14B, and he would already know who he had been paying. I was not waiting for an apology. I had stopped waiting for that around year 3. What I had been waiting for, without consciously naming it, was the specific moment when the ledger finally balanced. Not revenge. Balance. The cold, precise accounting of what was taken and what was built in its absence. 7 years ago, a 25-year-old woman sat on a cold curb with 2 garbage bags and a drained bank account and made a decision that changed everything. She decided to treat her exclusion as information rather than as a wound. She decided that the people who told her she would fail were describing their own limitations, not hers. She stopped measuring herself against their definitions and started building her own. The family that erased me had not done it because I was unworthy. They had done it because I was inconvenient. I would not fund Nathan's failures. I would not perform gratitude for a stability that was always contingent on my compliance. And when I refused to shrink, they removed me rather than adjust. That is what families built on control do when one member stops cooperating with the arrangement. I rebuilt from nothing because I had to, and because there was no one coming to help me. I did not have a co-signer for my first office lease. I did not have a family connection who sent anchor clients my way without expecting a percentage in return. Every door I walked through, I had found myself, and every relationship I built on the merit of the work and the reliability of my word. When my brother walked into my gala with a document demanding 35% of that, he was not asking for a fair share of something he had helped build. He was demanding payment for 7 years of silence he had mistaken for leverage. If you are in the middle of your own version of this, I need you to hear something clearly. The people who cut you off did not do it because there was something wrong with you. They did it because there was something inconvenient about you. Your independence. Your refusal to perform the role they assigned. Your unwillingness to keep funding their comfort with your own peace. You are allowed to build the thing. You are allowed to own the room. And when they come back, and they will come back, you are allowed to meet them at the door, as the person you actually became, and not the person they decided you were. Drop your city in the comments and tell me if this story hit close to home. Subscribe to Restoration Stories for more of these. And remember, the life they told you that you could not have is exactly the life you are building right now.